Hello. Today we're going to have a look at the HyperFlow Custom App Control API. It's the API that's used for custom and built-in embeddable chatbot to interact with published running flow graphs within the HyperFlow system. And we're going to see how that's built. There's a complete reference for this in the HyperFlow documentation set. I strongly recommend you study this and have a look at it. It contains all the details that you'd need to know. It's a full reference. This control API is used to build interactive apps that want to work with a running flow graph within the HyperFlow system. So let's have a look at an example of one of those. We built a helper chatbot that sits inside the Miranate Korean sentence analyzer. And the idea is that it will help students conversationally learning Korean. And they can ask questions about learning Korean. And it will interact with a running flow graph that's got all of the grammar library and neologism library and so forth built into its RAG knowledge base. So I can ask it things like, how do I express past tense, for example? It's going off, sending that prompt back to the running flow graph. The flow graph's looking up the knowledge in a knowledge base and calling an LLM to answer the question in a meaningful way here, showing you how to use the yup particles to and with some examples. And this is all coming out of this library that we've installed in a RAG knowledge base. Okay, so the flow graph that's running behind this chatbot is this guy here. Very simple, classic looping HyperFlow flow graph for a looping chatbot, a node that requests user input, a node that does a search for relevant knowledge chunks in a RAG knowledge base, injecting that into a call to an LLM with instructions on how to behave as a Korean tutor and looping around. Okay, so when you have a flow graph like this ready to run through the control API, perhaps powering some kind of interactive front end, you go through the publishing flow, pressing the publish button up here. This flow graph at the moment had already been published and it's back in maintenance mode, which is letting me do some testing and so forth for this video. I recommend that you have a look at the video number 6 in the HyperFlow channel on YouTube. It contains lots of details about how to prepare flow graphs for publishing and how to publish them and maintain them and so forth. Okay, so once you've published a flow graph, let's go here. Yes, you'll notice it will turn up. Here it is here. It turns up let's make this a bit bigger so you can see it. Here's the Miranate Explorer chatbot. When you publish a flow graph, it appears in this published flow graphs section of the project management page. You can see we're in maintenance mode at the moment. And what's interesting for us here is that there are some buttons here that for people implementing production apps of some kind, there's an embed code pop up. This is showing us how to embed the built-in chatbot, the embeddable chatbot, which is in fact what's happening here. Actually, let's have a look at some code. I meant to show you that. Let's see here. Yeah. So this is the code that implements the front end. The main Explorer page is called Miranate Explorer, and you can see the chatbot that we're running in that Miranate front page, that Miranate page, is implemented by this code here, just this code here. It's an iframe embed. The iframe embed system gives you an endpoint that you would use to bring up the embeddable chatbot with this flow graph ID. And it's very, very simple. If all you want is just an interactive chatbot style front end, I recommend that you use the embeddable chatbot. It takes care of all of the control API interaction for you. This is the only code you have to write to implement the thing. That's exactly what implemented this guy here. Okay, the button press essentially brought up this iframe. It's an iframe sitting inside the main Miranate page. Okay, so let's go back here, and here's again. Once you've published a flow graph, it's in the publish flow graph section of the organizer, the project manager page, and there are some buttons here that give you either the iframe embed codes if you wish to use the built-in Miranate chatbot, or if you want to implement your own custom front end and interact with the control API. There's some example control API calls here. In this case here, examples using the JavaScript Axios library for doing HTTP calls into the control API endpoints. They're RESTful APIs. There's two endpoints, just two endpoints. It's a relatively simple API. They both use JSON encoded parameters and responses, and which is sort of the classic way of implementing RESTful APIs these days. I guess we could just introduce you to the two endpoints right now as we're looking at this. The first one is the Start API endpoint. You're essentially using this to launch a new session of a given flow graph for the current application instance. It might be a chatbot sitting in a web page that an end user is wanting to launch, like we did with the Miranate chatbot. You give it the flow graph ID, and that will be provided for you. This has been inserted automatically. When you click this button here, it's picked up the internal ID of this chatbot and placed it in here for you. And so this is launching the flow graph that's got this ID. And once you've got it launched, it returns it returns in the response a session ID. So each launch of a published flow graph through the control API creates a completely new session, run session for that flow graph, so that every user has their own status, their own context that they're running this flow graph in. And you get back a session ID, and then subsequent interactions between the application and the running flow graph through the control progress endpoint. Essentially, you're running this control progress endpoint in a long pole, waiting for the flow graph to send stuff back. What it might send back are instructions to request a prompt, an input prompt from the user. The user types it in. You'd use the control progress endpoint to send that back to the flow graph, and the flow graph will mull on that and send you stuff back. So you essentially looping around calling this progress endpoint, sending up interactions from the user, getting back the responses and requests for more interaction from the flow graph. It's a relatively simple flow. Okay, and we'll look at the code that would typically implement and handle that. Right, so yeah, let me go back to here is this guy here. So once you've published a flow graph, or you're ready to publish a flow graph, and you want to see how it would interact with an interactive app, we have this flow graph simulator here. And so if I run this simulator, it goes through the pre-published flow, making sure that the flow graph is in a ready state for publishing, that there are no missing links, and that all of the parameters have been set. If I launch it, what I get here is I wonder if I should just zoom in a bit here, just so we can see it a little bit more. So the simulator is a dummy. It's a very, very simple host web page that contains the embedded chatbot and a log that's showing you the log of the API calls back and forward between the chatbot application and the running flow graph. So when this opens, the first thing it does is it sends a control start call up to the Miranate endpoint, passing it the flow graph to launch, and any query parameters that it might want to pass into the running flow graph. You can pass a number of parameters in, and the flow graph can pick those up. It might be a language code or a user ID or something like that. You can pass in any number of parameters. It comes back with the session ID. So this is the distinct session for this particular running of this version of the chatbot. Every start generates its own session context and comes back with the session ID. And you use that in subsequent calls to the progress endpoint. It's come back with a list of what are called responses, a response list. In this case here, it's come back with a start response saying that we've successfully started this flow graph. And it's immediately asked for an interaction from this flow graph here. So that's come from this user input. So let's have a look here. So once we've launched it, the first thing that this flow graph is going to do is request a user input. So this user input node here is responsible for causing this interaction request to come down from the flow graph. So different nodes in the flow graph might request different kinds of interaction from the user. For example, you can set up decision branch points where the user gets to press some buttons depending upon where they want to go through the flow graph, and this would turn up as a path choice interaction request. But the most typical one that you get is requesting a user interaction prompt. And what that's done in the built-in chatbot is it's enabled this input box here so that I can type stuff in, and I'll do the same thing. Maybe, what could I say? What's the idiomatic or iced Americano, say? And so what you see happened here is, as a result of me entering that prompt, a control progress has been sent up. This is the second in the two endpoints. So there's a start endpoint and there's a progress endpoint. And you can see there's a number of back and forths been happening between the chatbot here and the control endpoints. So the first thing we got back from sorry, let me start that again. The start has come back with a session ID and a request for an interaction. The interactions enabled this input box. As soon as the user types something, the chatbot has sent a control progress call back up to the endpoint. That contains the session ID, crucially. As I mentioned, each call should be repeating the session ID, so we're talking to the exact same running of the flow graph. And it's passed up, as you can see here, what's called a progress list. And this is information that's come from the flow graph that's being sent. And this come from the chat bot and this sent back up to the flow graph. In this case here, it's sent up the prompt data, which is the query that I put in. Okay, and that, of course, is going to wind up being, whereabouts are we here? No, this is the one I'm looking at. This is the prompt that requested that input. It's going to send the prompt into the search. It's going to send the found knowledge into this prompt, do an LLM call, get the response back. In fact, that's what you can see has happened here. This has sent back the response, and then the running flow graph has the opportunity to send back a busy message saying, oh, I'm off doing what you want. And in this case here, it's not asked for any more interaction. So the chatbot immediately sends another control progress call up. In this case here, a poll update. So we're always running the interactive apps in this long poll mode, where we're waiting for output from the flow graph, requests for user interaction. If there's no user interaction, we'll immediately call back to the control endpoint with a poll update, waiting for some more stuff to come. So we're waiting for the response from the LLM, and here it comes. So this is the response that's come out of this call. As the response comes back, it gets sent out to the automatically out through the control response API call. And as you can see, here's the generated text. So it's coming back as a generated text entry here. And because we've looped around, it's come back and asked for another interaction spec. So the response to a progress call can be a list of responses that can contain output that should be displayed to the user potentially. And it can contain interaction requests that might request an input prompt or a button to be pressed or some other action to be performed. So typically you're sending up results or sending up user interaction stuff as a control, as the body of a control call. You're getting back responses that contain outputs to display and interactions to request. And we'll look and see how that's implemented in the code that implements this guy here. Because this is a looping chatbot, I can continue to ask questions. Here, as you can imagine, it will essentially go in a loop. Each loop will be calling the control endpoint, sending up user input, getting back output and requests for other interactions from the flow graph. That's typically the way things going on. Very simple endpoints, lists of requests going up from the chatbot app or the AI app, coming back with lists of responses from the running flow graph. It's essentially as simple as that. The documentation, if you go and you have a look at it, the key thing that you'll see here is, of course, there's information about how you should construct the calls and what the overall shape of the responses are, what the primary data fields are. And you can see here is a typical response that's coming back from the control API. It's coming back with, no, I think this is the response to a start by the looks of it. It's coming back with a session ID. It's telling you what step you are in the flow graph, and it's coming back with this list of responses. And so this list here that you see is what we were looking at in, I think, yeah, that's what this list of responses is here. Okay, the start and the interaction spec. And if we look here at the documentation, this is what it looks like in the JSON body that's come back from the start call. It's a type. Each of the responses has a type and some other properties that depend upon the type. So here's the start message that's come back. So here's a message that might be perhaps printed out and shown. This is a message to the user. That would come from a message to user node. And here's an interaction request asking for a prompt. So this, in this particular case, the flow graph that was running is called the Webtoon generator. It's prompted the user to provide a story plot outline, and it's requested the user to prompt this thing. Okay. And what you'll see here is a list of all of the different kinds of response types that's in that response list. So you get back a responses list. It's a list of typed entries. And here are all of the kinds of entries that can come back from the flow graph. Interaction requests, messages to the user, media coming back. The chatbot might generate an image. This will come back with a URL for that image. If the flow graph ends, and so on and so forth, generated text from an LLM, messages to send to the host application and whatnot. There's 15 or 20 different response types that come back. And typically the chatbot or the interactive app would be interpreting these, and we'll show you what the interpretation looks like. Anyway, this documentation contains a complete definition of all of the different kinds of responses that can come back from a running flow graph. And the kinds of, and further down here, it talks about the kinds of ways in which you send information back up, like user prompt requests and so forth. Okay, so, right, so I think now's the time maybe to dig into the code that implements the embedded chatbot here that's doing this interaction with the control endpoints. I got that here, I think. If we do this, yeah, here we go, here. So right now, the embeddable chatbot sources are in the main HyperFlow mono repo. We plan to, at MVP release, extract this embeddable chatbot implementation and make it available free to customers who want to use this as a basis for building their own apps. It's both a reference implementation that shows you how to interact with the Control API, and it's a piece of code you can do what you want with. You can modify it and build your own versions of it, an interactive app or chatbot on top of the thing. And it'll be a small standalone React, create React app, which we'll provide for you. The key things to look at here is the main page. There's a single page for the embedded chatbot. And it's essentially, as it comes up and gets going, it's deciding whether to send a controlled start. I think, yeah, we're about to here. And here's the start session call here. So we're calling up the start session and passing up a flow graph ID and any query parameters that we want to make available to the running flow graph. And I think this one actually implements a cached session so that if the user's been interacting with the chatbot and we want to get a page refresh or for the user to go and come back again, it's stored a copy of the interaction in local storage, and this implementation here will pull that back again if you want it. Okay, so this is the code that's initiated the running of a flow graph in the main page. I think if we go here and look at the main container that that holds the main implementation component for the chatbot, the prime work that's going on here is pulling up custom styles. So let's see, where could you see this easily? The embeddable chatbot that's part of HyperFlow is completely stylable. I think if we bring up HyperFlow, I should have done this before, probably. HyperFlow. See here. And we go here. What you see here is a series of demonstration example chatbots that you can get to and have a look at. Each one of these is an instance of the embeddable chatbot with different stylings, different background colors, different font colors, title bars, icons, and so forth. Each one of these is being run by HyperFlow Flow Graph, and each one of these is an instance of a styled embedded chatbot. And the code that we were looking at before, this code here, is basically looking up the style definitions that it should make use of. And in this case here, there's a whole bunch of CSS and settings and so forth that's defining background colors and fonts and icons and so forth. So this may be a little more sophisticated than you would build for your own custom app, but it gives you an idea of how you could build stylable front ends if you want to. And this will be made available to you. So again, the main page is launching the flow graph. It's activating the main component that's implementing the thing that's hosted in a container. The container is looking up styles, dynamic styles from a style database, and it's wrapping this embeddable bot component, passing in the styles and the query parameters, as you can see. This embeddable bot is implemented here. Okay, so this is a classic React app that we're looking at here. We're using React plus Zustand. This code at the front here is picking up the custom styles. You may not make use of all of that, but the key points are here. As responses come back, they're placed in a Zustand store. I think we've got a store here, have we? Yeah, there's a Zustand store. And so this is a state store for this running flow graph. And the key things that it has in it are this responses array. So whenever a response comes back from the control progress or the control start or progress API, that list of responses is placed in this responses list here. And back here, this is a use effect loop, essentially, that's watching for new responses coming in and looping over those responses, looking at the response type and doing the kind of thing that you would need to do to respond to those commands coming back from, or those messages coming back from the running flow graph. So you can see here, in this case, once we've got a start message saying that the flow graph has started, you can configure the thing to pick up the flow graph name and stick it in the title. If there's a message to display to the user, I have a capability in the bot state store to build essentially a chat history. What you see in the, if we go back here, yes, what you see here is a list of, here's a title, here a greeting, here's the user prompt, here's the response, and so forth. The display of all of these things sits in a chat history structure back in this code. Here it is here. So the chat history contains a sequence of all of the interactions and displays that are being shown in the chat window. So the interpreter of the messages coming down from the flow graph are looking at each of the message types that's coming in and deciding what to do. So in this case here, getting a message to display to the end user, we're adding the message text to the chat history. Here's a busy message. Here's an interaction request. So this looks at the kind of interaction that the flow graph is asking for. There are 3 kinds at the moment: a prompt wanting some interaction, a request for a file upload. We support file uploads through the embeddable chatbot, and a request from a branch choice, where the user can choose different branches in the flow. In each case here, what it's doing is it's setting up state that will cause an interaction to be indicated and requested of the user. Generated text. So essentially, the responses that are coming back from the flow graph, the prime thing that the application should be doing, the front end application, is looping over the responses that have come back from the flow graph, from the flow graph, and doing what's necessary in the UI to do that. You can see here we get back media, so we're going to stick a media display into the chat history. This chat history is going to be interpreted down here. We'll go and have a look at the main code that displays it. Yeah, so here is the actual display of the internals of the chatbot. The title bar that you can see up here. If we set the title, it'll show up in the title bar. And then here's the chat body, which primarily is this chat history. And it's a loop over the chat history, looking at all of the kinds of entries that have been placed in the chat history, and this is displaying them appropriately. So if there's output from an LLM, it's displayed here with a markdown renderer. The many LLMs will generate markdown responses, and so in the built-in embeddable chatbot, we will automatically render that as rich text for you using a third-party markdown rendering tool. If there's if there's a history of a user prompt, this is displayed here. If there's a branch choice, it shows you what choice was picked up. If there was a file upload, it tells you what the name was, and it'll give you an image so you can see it, and so on and so forth. If there's references, it's got a way to display the references. So essentially, there's 2 main components in the embeddable chatbot. There's this loop up here that's interpreting all of the messages that are coming back from the control API, from the running flow graph, either conditioning input or preparing to display something in the output. And then down here in the actual body of the display component, it's running, in this case here, over this thing that we're calling a chat history, which is essentially keeping a track of all of the interactions and all the displays that you might have in an interactive app, interpreting them and displaying them appropriately. Okay. All right. So I think I'll probably leave it at that for now. This is quite a long exposition as it is. Certainly, when the source for this thing is available, we'll also be providing some side documentation to basically go over what I've just been going over to help you understand this. We might simplify this a little. We may take out the custom, all of this custom styling. It adds complexity that we want to make available in the embeddable bot, but you may not need. We might simplify it a little bit. But hopefully it'll be something that you can use to model and build your own interactive apps on that are making use of this rather cool control API that's available for interacting with running flow graphs. Okay, thanks very much.